What do you do when the one person who's supposed to have your back plants the knife instead? If you've ever felt like your family cheered the loudest when you lost, stay with me. You're not alone. This is a story about betrayal, rebuilding, and the unexpected power of walking away from the people you thought you needed most. My name's Lila Carter. I'm 32. I'm an interior designer living in Atlanta, Georgia. And up until last year, I thought I had it all figured out. But if you really want to understand what happened, you'll need to go back with me, because this story doesn't start in my new apartment or in my showroom. It starts on a street in Inman Park, with a house that almost became mine. It had white trim and faded blue siding, the kind of craftsman you only ever see on Pinterest boards titled My Dream Life. The porch wrapped around like open arms, and the front window faced east, perfect morning light for design consultations. I must have driven by that house 100 times, imagining clients walking through, running their fingers across velvet sofas I'd picked, sipping espresso under the Edison bulb chandelier I already had bookmarked online. I was standing outside the gate, sketchbook clutched to my chest, the early spring air still crisp enough to bite the tips of my ears. Somewhere behind me, the city buzzed. Cars rumbling, dogs barking, someone arguing on a phone. But all I heard was possibility. My fingers itched to get inside, to make it mine. I'd told Ethan about it over Sunday dinner, 2 weeks before everything fell apart. He barely looked up from his phone. "You're gonna buy that place?" he scoffed. "Looks like it needs a new foundation and an exorcist." Our mom laughed nervously. "Ethan!" But I saw it, that flicker in his eyes. Not concern, competition, like my dream annoyed him just by existing. Ethan's always been that way, charming on the surface. Real estate degree, big smile, the kind of guy people believe too fast. But underneath, he's always needed to win. And I guess, in our family, he usually did. That night, I stayed up rereading my loan approvals, double-checking my design estimates. The house was a stretch, but doable, and worth it. I'd saved for 5 years. Every commission, every freelance gig, all of it went into that down payment. I made the appointment with the realtor for the following Thursday. I even picked out a bottle of champagne, planning to celebrate with Tessa, my best friend and co-worker, once the deposit cleared. I wore my lucky heels that morning, black suede, tiny scuff on the left toe. They made me feel tall, steady, like someone who deserved to step into her dream. The office smelled like new carpet and stale coffee. The receptionist smiled and pointed me toward the closing room. But as I stepped inside, something shifted. My realtor, Bethany, wouldn't meet my eyes. "Lila," she started gently. I'm so sorry, but the property's no longer available." I blinked. "What do you mean? We had the paperwork ready. I'm here to make the deposit." She hesitated. "It was purchased this morning, all cash." My heart thudded against my ribs. "By who?" She opened a folder. Her voice dropped. "Ethan Carter, is that your brother?" I couldn't speak. Just stood there, gripping the edge of the table so tight my knuckles turned white. The room spun slightly. I tasted metal at the back of my throat. I hadn't even known he was looking at property in Inman Park, let alone my house. I stepped outside, phone already ringing. He answered on the second ring, all casual, like we hadn't just collided in the most brutal way. "Lila," he said. "Hey, what's up? What the hell did you do?" Silence. "Are you seriously asking me that?" My voice was shaking. "You bought my house," he exhaled. "Come on, don't be dramatic. You never even had an offer in. It was on the market." "I was putting the deposit down today. You knew that. I told you at dinner. I didn't think you were serious. I mean, turning it into some artsy-fartsy design shop? That place needs too much work." I could feel my throat tightening. "You bought it just to, what, spite me?" "No, Lila. I'm turning it into an Airbnb. It's a smart move, high traffic, good location." I couldn't breathe. "You used Mom and Dad's money, didn't you?" Another pause. They helped a little. I needed a break after the job loss. They understood. I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered, "They helped you steal my dream." "You'll find another," he said, like he was handing me a consolation prize. "It's just a house." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. Not that I regret much anymore. That night my parents came by. They brought takeout, like dinner could smooth over betrayal. He needed a reset, Mom said softly, eyes darting to Dad. And you're so strong, honey. We thought you'd bounce back. I didn't speak, couldn't. I just stared at the styrofoam box in front of me until the room blurred. Outside, back at the house, the porch light was already on. A temporary sign leaned against the post, "Future luxury stay coming soon." I stood there long after the street went quiet, after my parents' car pulled away, after the moon rose. The air felt thicker now, heavier. I thought about all the mornings I'd imagined sipping coffee on that porch, greeting neighbors, building something that was mine, and now I was just a shadow on the sidewalk, a spectator to someone else's win. I didn't cry at first. I just stood there, arms wrapped around myself, the wind pushing against my jacket. But then something broke. Silent, hot tears slid down my cheeks, and I let them. I let them fall. Because the truth had settled in. My brother didn't just take a house. He took a future I'd fought to build. And in that moment, I had no idea how I was going to recover. But I knew one thing. I was done pretending this family wouldn't hurt me. I don't remember driving home that night. All I recall is the way my fingers gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale, the radio off, headlights spilling over sidewalks I used to love. Streets I'd dreamed of calling home felt foreign now, like I was trespassing in a version of Atlanta that no longer wanted me. The next morning, I sat at the edge of my childhood bed, the same one with the faded floral quilt, the dent in the left pillow where I used to cry after middle school drama. But this time, I wasn't 13. I was 32, and somehow I felt smaller than I had back then. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Dad had left early for his walking group. Mom's perfume still hung faintly in the hallway. That sharp lilac scent that used to mean comfort, but now felt like something was trying too hard to stay sweet. I opened my laptop, not for emails or invoices, just to see if it was real. It was worse than real. There it was, Ethan's new Airbnb listing. My house. The porch now cluttered with cheap patio furniture from a clearance warehouse, the living room stripped of character, replaced by beige throws and oversized signs that screamed, "Bless this mess," in curling cursive fonts. He'd painted over the original crown molding, turned my dream showroom into some sterile, soulless rental for weekend brunchers. I slammed the laptop shut, harder than I meant to. My breath caught. I hadn't even realized I was crying again. "It's just a house, Lila." That phrase looped in my mind like some broken lullaby. Only it wasn't just a house. It was mine. And they all knew it. I started packing that afternoon, one suitcase at a time, one drawer after another. Every item felt like a question. Is this still mine? The photos on my nightstand, me and Tessa in college, my first design award, the sketch of the Inman Park craftsman I'd drawn 2 years ago before I even knew it would go on the market. I rolled them in bubble wrap with shaking hands. Mom hovered near the doorway. "Sweetheart, are you sure this is necessary?" I didn't look up. "Yes. You can stay as long as you want. This is your home." I paused, clutching a stack of fabric samples. "Is it?" She didn't answer, just walked away softly, like a guilty ghost. At the firm, I kept my head down. Projects stacked up, clients emailed questions, invoices came and went. Tessa, my work partner and best friend, noticed before anyone else. "You've been quiet," she said one morning, setting a cappuccino by my desk. "More than usual." I faked a smile. "Just tired." She didn't buy it. "You didn't even touch the scone I brought. You always eat the scone." I forced a bite. Cardboard. Even sugar couldn't distract me. Later that week, she found me alone in the supply closet, staring blankly at a sample board I wasn't even working on. "You know I'm not your therapist," she said gently, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. "But I am your friend, and something's wrong." I hesitated. Then the words tumbled out. Not everything, just the shape of it. "My brother bought the house I was going to turn into my showroom." Tessa blinked. "Wait, the craftsman in Inman Park?" I nodded. "He knew. I told him, and he still took it." "Holy hell, Lila." "Yeah." She didn't say I'd bounce back. She didn't say it wasn't meant to be. She just sat on the step stool beside me and held my hand. That night, I went back. I told myself it was closure, but part of me still hoped the porch light wouldn't be on, that maybe it had all been a mistake. It wasn't. From the street I saw it. Bright outdoor bulbs, warm yellow light spilling from the windows, cheap new curtains, a car in the driveway. A couple sat on the porch, sipping something fizzy in mason jars, laughing. My porch. They didn't know me. Why would they? To them, I was just a figure passing by. But I knew every curve of that railing. I had plans for a vertical herb wall right where they were sitting. There was supposed to be a mural behind the couch, a hand-painted piece I'd sketched for months. And now it was gone. I slid into my car and just sat there, hands limp in my lap, the key still in the ignition. I stared until my vision blurred. I whispered, "I'm done with them." My voice was barely there, but I heard it, and it felt final. I didn't go home. Not the real home, not the childhood one either. I drove to Tessa's place, rang the bell, and when she opened the door, I said, "I can't stay there anymore." She didn't ask. She just stepped aside and said, "You're staying here." The next morning, I woke up to birdsong and the faint scent of toast. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, dancing across her chevron rug. In the kitchen, Tessa slid over a mug of coffee, then pointed her spatula at me like a sword. "You're getting out of that house. We're going to find you a new place." "I can't afford—" "Yes, you can. And even if you can't, we'll figure it out. This is not the end. It's the start of something better." I wanted to believe her, but my bones still felt heavy with disappointment. My dreams felt cracked, useless. That evening, as she went to shower, I wandered into her guest room and found an old sketchbook of mine, the one I'd left here years ago during an overnight project binge. I flipped through it. Designs, rooms I'd dreamed up, textures, shapes, spaces that made people feel something. That's what I was good at, not just decorating, transforming, and maybe that hadn't been stolen. Not really. Still, part of me wondered if that spark would ever come back. But deep in my chest, under all the pain, there was something flickering, dim, but not dead. A week later, I packed the last of my boxes from my parents' house. I didn't tell them I was leaving. I didn't think I needed to. They hadn't asked how I was. They hadn't even asked if I was okay. As I closed the trunk of my car, I looked back one last time. The house I grew up in, the memories inside, birthday candles, school fights, late-night talks with Mom in the kitchen. It wasn't all bad, but it wasn't home anymore. I pulled away slowly, not looking in the rearview mirror, because sometimes forward is the only direction you have left. And somewhere in the distance, maybe in Midtown, maybe in a stranger's coffee shop, something new was waiting to be built. The first night in my new place, the walls echoed, not with noise but silence. A strange, empty hush that made even my own breathing feel loud. It was a studio apartment in Midtown, small, square, and bright in the way that only blank spaces can be. The kind of place that didn't pretend to hold memories yet, just waiting, like a fresh canvas. The floor creaked near the window, the fridge hummed too loud at night, and the view overlooked a parking lot. But it was mine. The landlord had left a little welcome packet, 2 keys on a cheap metal ring, a brittle packet of basil seeds, and a handwritten note that said, "Every new beginning needs a little green." I taped that note to the fridge with a grocery receipt. The first thing I did was paint. Tessa insisted we make it a ritual. "Mark your territory," she said, handing me a roller and a tray of blush-tinted white. We played music loud, the kind that makes your chest thump, and danced barefoot across the tarp as paint splattered our arms and cheeks. With each stroke, I felt something lift, something unspoken. The old pain didn't disappear, but it softened, like layers of dust being brushed off an old frame. When she left that night, the apartment was still a mess. Open pizza boxes, paintbrushes in the sink, but I felt less alone than I had in weeks. The next morning, I walked to a cafe around the corner called Butterbean & Co., a mix of chipped vintage furniture, open shelves stacked with jars of homemade preserves, and the smell, oh, the smell, cinnamon, dark roast, and butter all tangled together in the air. I ordered a cortado and settled into the window seat with my sketchbook, pretending not to notice the chaos in my stomach. Starting over sounded noble on paper, but in real life, it just felt raw. That's when I first saw her. She wore a red bandana over a halo of tight curls, an apron with splashes of sauce on it, and sneakers that had clearly lived 3 lives already. She had this way of moving, like she was late for everything and still in total control. She set a plate of beignets on the table beside mine and turned to me. "You didn't order food. Rookie mistake." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "The barista's new. She won't tell you the real menu unless you look like you need it. You. Right now?" She pointed at me with a spatula. "You look like someone who needs cinnamon beignets. Stat." I smiled for the first time that day, maybe even that week. She sat down uninvited, tore a beignet in half, and said, "I'm Maya. I run the food truck parked outside." "Lila, I'm recovering." "From what?" I hesitated. "From my own family." She didn't flinch, just handed me the other half and said, "Yeah, that's a flavor I know." We talked for hours, not all heavy stuff. Some of it was ridiculous, like her story about burning 5 pounds of garlic bread because she'd fallen for a jazz musician mid-service. But somewhere in the laughter I realized my shoulders weren't clenched anymore. Maya was chaos and comfort rolled into one, and she didn't ask me for anything. She just offered space. Over the next few weeks, I rebuilt little routines. Morning walks to the corner store, late-night sketching by the window, letting the city lights bleed into my page. I filled my walls with sticky notes, quotes, ideas, color swatches, floor plan doodles. A quiet hum was building again. Tessa noticed. "You're glowing," she said one Thursday at the office, poking at my cheek. "Are you falling in love?" "Not with a person," I said. "With possibility?" She grinned. "You're coming with me Saturday." "Where?" "A networking thing. Creative types. The kind who wear glasses they don't need and drink wine that tastes like tree bark." I rolled my eyes. "You had me at unnecessary glasses." That Saturday night, I stood in front of a mirror longer than usual. I wore a linen jumpsuit that hugged just enough, gold hoops I hadn't touched in a year, and a thin chain around my wrist, a gift from a client I'd once helped turn a laundry closet into a reading nook. When I walked into the venue, an art co-op draped in string lights and jazz, I felt something I hadn't felt since losing the house. Electricity. People mingled around installations made of scrap metal and moss. A woman painted live portraits in the corner while someone read slam poetry about Atlanta traffic. I found Maya near the bar, laughing with a group of artists. She pulled me into the circle like I'd always been there. That's where I met Javier. He stood in front of a massive canvas, mid-brushstroke, painting a mural of the Atlanta skyline, but upside down. Literally. I asked him why. He didn't even pause. Because sometimes you gotta look at the familiar like it betrayed you, then paint it back into something that tells the truth. It hit me harder than it should have. He turned to me. "You're Lila, right? Maya's friend with the sketchbook full of quiet explosions." I blushed. "She talks too much. She talks just enough." Later, after the music faded and the room thinned out, I found myself sitting on the curb outside with Maya and Javier. We shared a bag of warm pretzels from someone's stand and talked about what we'd build if money wasn't real. "A gallery that smells like coffee," I said. "A food truck that's also a wedding chapel," Maya chimed in. "An open warehouse," Javier said softly. "Walls you can erase every week, new art every 7 days, like breathing." We sat in silence for a while after that. I pulled out my sketchbook and drew something, a floor plan, part showroom, part gathering space, a place where design, food, and art lived together, messy and vibrant and full of stories. When I looked up, they were both watching me. "Damn," Javier said. "Let's build that." I laughed, half joking. "Yeah, maybe someday." But even as I said it, something flickered inside. A seed, not of revenge, not even of redemption, just a beginning. Back in my apartment that night, I stared out at the midtown skyline. Cranes in motion, buildings wrapped in scaffolding, windows still lit at 2 a.m. The city wasn't sleeping. It was creating. I taped my sketch to the wall beside the basil note. This wasn't what I'd planned, but maybe it could be better. And somewhere between the paint on my fingers and the burn in my chest, I finally understood. Ethan didn't take my dream. He just freed me to dream something bigger. I just didn't know yet how hard and beautiful that journey would become. The venue pulsed like it had a heartbeat of its own. Warm bulbs dangled from exposed beams, casting golden halos over scattered canvas, folding chairs, and paint-splattered easels. The floor was scuffed in a way that whispered stories, shoes that danced, voices that cracked, dreams that almost made it. The air smelled like turmeric, sweat, and something sweet burning in a crock-pot near the back. I stood just inside the door, my fingers resting lightly on the strap of my crossbody sketchbook. I wasn't sure if I belonged here yet, but something inside me, something quiet and restless, urged me not to turn around. Maya was already deep in conversation with a group of women dressed in denim overalls and patchwork scarves, laughing about the logistics of building a mobile bakery out of a converted school bus. She caught my eye and waved me over. "Lila's here, now it's officially a party." I smiled, but my chest fluttered. It still felt strange being welcomed so easily, like I hadn't just come from the rubble of a life I thought I was building. Before I could sit down, a voice came from the corner. "Tell me you brought that sketchbook." Javier leaned against the frame of a massive, unfinished mural, bold streaks of teal and mustard layered over jagged charcoal outlines. His shirt was stained with paint, his hair tied back in a messy knot. He looked like a person always halfway between creation and collapse. I held up the book. He grinned. "Good. You owe me a tour." I slid onto the worn velvet couch beside him. He flipped through the pages slowly, his fingertips brushing the edges like they mattered. Like they weren't just paper and ink, but something sacred. He stopped on a recent sketch, the one I'd done after our late-night conversation. A wide-open warehouse, modular walls, food carts lined under string lights, gallery nooks with rotating installations. At the center was a long communal table made of reclaimed wood, candles dripping wax onto its cracks. "You really see this," he said quietly. "I do," I whispered. "I just don't know if anyone else will." Javier closed the book gently. "That's how you know it's real." Later that night, after the music had thinned to soft vinyl crackle and most of the crowd had melted into the dark, I found myself outside with Maya and Javier again. The three of us sat on the curb, knees brushing, shoulders hunched against the chill. Someone had left half a container of churros on the bench. Maya insisted we split them. Between bites, I told them everything. Not all at once. Not clean or rehearsed, just fragments. How I'd spent years saving for that house. How my brother had watched me dream out loud and then quietly snatched it. How my parents had nodded along like it was inevitable. Like I didn't matter as much. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Because in their silence, in Maya's quiet hum of sympathy, in Javier's stillness, I felt understood. I was going to turn it into something beautiful, I murmured, not just for me, for clients, for people who wanted more than beige walls and trend pieces. It was supposed to mean something. "It still can," Maya said. "You're still here, and you've got those hands, that fire." I looked at them. Two people I'd only just met. Two people who had no obligation to care, but they did, fully, fiercely. That night, I stayed up until 3 a.m. The city was quiet outside my window, traffic lights blinking red over empty streets, a siren in the distance, the occasional laugh spilling out from someone's rooftop party. I covered my coffee table in paper, big sheets, messy lines. I didn't plan, I just let it pour out. Textures, tables, murals, lighting, a space that breathed, a space that healed. When I stepped back, I saw it, the first draft of something more than recovery. A pop-up. Not a showroom yet, but a proof of concept, something alive, mobile, collaborative. A night where food and art and design collided, where the right kind of chaos could happen. The next morning, I invited Maya and Javier to my place. Javier was the first to speak when he saw the sketches taped across the walls. "You want to do this in Atlanta?" "Why not?" I said. Maya tilted her head. "Where?" I hesitated, then pulled out my phone. "There's this old warehouse in West End. I passed it on the bus last week. It's abandoned, but I think it's got potential. High ceilings, brick walls, lots of light." Javier's eyes lit up. "I've painted the outside. It's got soul." "I want to fill it with something that doesn't feel like compromise," I said. "Something that tells a story." "We'll need more people," Maya added. "Vendors, permits, marketing." "I know," I said. "It's crazy." "No," Javier said, already pulling out a pencil. "It's possible." We spent the rest of the day in a swirl of ideas. Floor plans turned into conversations. Conversations turned into phone calls. Tessa came by that evening and helped map out a potential guest list. It felt electric, like I'd found the current again. That night, we ended up at a diner off Ponce. Greasy booths, neon buzz, the kind of place where time didn't matter. Javier sketched on a napkin. Maya scrolled through her phone, listing food partners she could call. I sipped burnt coffee and watched them, these strange, beautiful souls who were helping me build something from the ashes. I thought about the house again, the one I'd lost. But for the first time, it didn't sting as sharply. Because this new dream wasn't just about four walls. It was about people, vibration, story. It wasn't about what I was building anymore. It was about who I was building it with, and that changed everything. Later, as I lay in bed with my eyes wide open and heart still racing, I whispered into the darkness, "Let's do this." Not out of vengeance, not even out of ambition, but out of the simple, quiet belief that I was still here, still dreaming, still creating, still me. I didn't know then how hard it would get, how much doubt would creep in, how many nights I'd question everything all over again. But in that moment, I had a spark, and sometimes that's all you need. There was mold near the corners of the ceiling, the kind that spread like a quiet threat, creeping down concrete walls in long, greenish streaks. But standing in the center of that empty West End warehouse, with dust swirling around my ankles and sunlight slicing through broken window panes, all I saw was potential. "God, it stinks," Maya said, pulling her scarf up over her nose. "Like wet dog and regret." Javier laughed from somewhere near the back. "Nah, that's just character." I walked slowly across the cracked floor, letting my fingers trail along a row of rusted support beams. The warehouse was cavernous, 30-foot ceilings, exposed ducts, and more square footage than any of us had ever worked with. It was cold and raw and full of bad decisions, but in that rawness, there was space. Real, honest space. I could already hear the hum of voices, the clatter of forks on plates, the beat of jazz echoing off the brick. This wasn't a showroom yet, but it could be the start. I dropped my tote in the center of the floor and unrolled the blueprints I'd printed at Tessa's office. Javier crouched beside me, brow furrowed. "This is ambitious." "You say that like it's a bad thing." He smirked. "No, I mean, good ambitious, scary ambitious." Maya kicked aside an old paint can. "Okay, visionary people, tell me what we're working with. Walk me through it." So I did. I pointed to the northeast corner, where the entrance would be, with vintage doors salvaged from an old schoolhouse. Then to the far wall, where Javier's murals would wrap around columns, leading into a cozy cafe-style nook. Maya's food trucks would line the alley outside, serving through retractable windows. Community tables in the center, pop-up booths for local artists and makers, candles, string lights, texture, breath. I looked up. "It's not just an event. It's an experience." Maya exhaled. "I'm in." Javier added, "Tell me when we start painting." But before the adrenaline could settle, the doubts crept in. Permits, power, plumbing, insurance, rent. We had none of it. Just ideas, notebooks, and 3 people who couldn't stop dreaming out loud. That night, after dinner at Maya's place, her kitchen a war zone of cast iron pans and chili oil, I stayed behind, helping her scrub trays. "Tell me if this is too much," I said quietly. "I know I can get intense." Maya turned, brow furrowed. "Too much? Girl, this is the first time I've seen you alive. Don't apologize for that." I stared at the sponge in my hands. I keep thinking about what Ethan said, that I'd find another house, like it was disposable, like I was. "You're not disposable," she said, voice sharp. "You're a damn force." I didn't reply, but I think she saw it, the way my jaw clenched, the way I blinked too long. The next day, we made a list, the real kind. Costs, resources, logistics, timelines. Not glamorous, not visionary, but necessary. Tessa helped with the business registration paperwork. Javier called in favors from his artist friends. Maya got in touch with a few food vendors she'd met at festivals. We needed a miracle. Instead, we got momentum. A muralist named Keisha offered to paint the entryway, as long as I get to keep a corner to myself. A carpenter named Troy donated reclaimed wood. Someone from the community center lent us a generator. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't easy. Some nights I'd lie awake in my studio apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. What if no one came? What if I poured my soul into this and it collapsed like everything else? What if Ethan was right? But then I'd look at the sketches taped above my bed, the string lights, the gallery wall, the open tables. I'd remember the way people smiled when they heard about it, the way their eyes lit up, like we were building something they had wanted but never dared to ask for. We weren't just designing a pop-up, we were designing possibility. One afternoon, I stood in the middle of the warehouse, pencil behind my ear, measuring tape in one hand, as Javier painted massive swirls of burnt sienna and gold across a column. He didn't ask what it was supposed to be, neither did I. It was just feeling. Maya arrived late, phone tucked between her shoulder and cheek, juggling a crate of spices. "Guess who just agreed to do dessert stations?" she said, breathless. "Sugar Bloom, that fancy patisserie from Grant Park." I nearly dropped my clipboard. "Shut up," she grinned. "Told them we were the future of Atlanta." We laughed. It echoed through the space, loud and warm. And then, one of my favorite moments, something small, quiet. Javier pulled something from his satchel, a piece of parchment, rough and thick, hand-sketched in black ink. It was my warehouse drawing, but reimagined, with color and texture, life radiating from it. At the bottom, he'd written, "A space made by Lila, for everyone." He handed it to me without a word. I looked at it, then at him. "You didn't have to. You're building this for all of us," he said. "But it started with you." I swallowed hard. He didn't hug me. He just pressed the drawing into my hands and turned back to his mural. That was enough. That night, I stayed long after everyone else had left. The warehouse was dim, the city breathing outside in slow pulses of car horns and wind. I stood in the center, sketch in hand, heart buzzing. I walked the perimeter slowly, checking the plan, noting where the lights would go, the booths, the installations. I whispered aloud the names of everyone helping, just to remind myself this wasn't a fantasy. It was real. It was happening. But the doubts, they still flickered in the corners. Rent was due next week. Permits were still pending. I had $438 in my business account. And yet, I wasn't afraid, because this time, I wasn't building alone. I had Maya, Javier, Tessa, Keisha, Troy, a dozen others showing up in quiet ways, handing me tools, cheering from the sidelines. This was family, not the kind you're born into, the kind you choose, the kind that shows up when your hands are shaking, but your dream refuses to die. And as I stood in the center of that barely legal construction site, paint dust in my hair and calluses forming on my palms, I whispered, "Let's make this unforgettable." I didn't know how it would turn out, but I knew this. If the house in Inman Park was the dream that died, this was the one that would teach me how to live again. The sound of drills and laughter echoed through the warehouse like music. It was well past midnight, and we were still there, Maya balancing on a step stool, stringing up paper lanterns, Javier painting stars onto a corner beam in slow, sweeping strokes, and me curled up on a makeshift bench made of shipping pallets, watching it all unfold. Paint-splattered coffee mugs cluttered a table nearby. Empty takeout boxes lay in a heap beneath a half-finished mural. The air smelled like sawdust and cumin and something sweet I couldn't place. Javier called it the heartbeat before birth, that moment when a space inhales before it becomes something. "I still can't believe we pulled all this together," I said, my voice barely louder than the hum of the lights. Maya grinned from her perch. "That's because we haven't actually pulled it together yet." She hopped down, wiped sweat from her brow with her sleeve, and flopped next to me, her legs sprawled out like a kid on summer break. Her face was smudged with paint and joy. "We're close," I said, "and it's beautiful." Javier looked over his shoulder, brush still in hand. "You're beautiful." I blinked. He laughed softly. "I meant the design, the space." But he looked at me for a second too long, and I felt my cheeks go warm. We didn't say anything else for a while, just sat there, breathing it in, the stillness, the promise. Around 2 a.m., we made a blanket nest from extra tablecloths and slept on the floor, our limbs tangled near cans of paint and tangled extension cords. I woke to sunlight pooling through the high windows, and Maya snoring softly beside me, her phone vibrating under her arm. The text on her screen caught my eye. "Mom, proud of you. Hope you're taking care of yourself." I didn't mean to read it, but something in the words hit me harder than I expected. Proud, taking care, words I hadn't heard from my parents in months, maybe longer. I slipped out quietly, tiptoeing through the half-built dream, and stepped outside. The air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. Across the street, a man sold hot churros from a pushcart. He waved when I passed. I waved back. Back in my apartment, I showered, changed into clean clothes, and sat by the window with a notebook. I didn't sketch. I wrote. For the first time in weeks, I let my thoughts spill out. How scared I was of failing, how strange it felt to be seen, how grateful I was for this little, messy, makeshift family we were building. The next day, we hosted a volunteer meeting in the warehouse. People showed up, lots of them, friends of friends, strangers who'd heard about the pop-up with Soul. A woman from the Midtown Co-op brought folding chairs. A local baker offered pastries. Someone played jazz on a Bluetooth speaker. It was chaos, controlled, joyful chaos. As I walked through the crowd, I caught fragments of conversation. "Did you see the mural in the back? Maya's empanadas? Unreal." "Lila said there'll be a poetry corner. I'm bringing my chapbook." Every voice added something to the space. Every person left a fingerprint. Later that night, as we cleaned up scraps of ribbon and empty paint cans, Javier handed me a folded piece of paper, a sketch, but not mine. His. It was a portrait. Me, seated in the middle of the warehouse floor, barefoot, head bowed, surrounded by lanterns and laughter. He'd drawn it from memory. I didn't know what to say, so I just looked at him. "You're the core," he said. "You gave us the map." My throat tightened. I tucked the sketch into my bag like a secret. That weekend, I got a call from my mother. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe right. "Hi, honey," she said, her voice overly bright. "We've been thinking of you." My heart beat a little faster. "Okay. Well, Ethan's opening his Airbnb next week. He's doing a little party. We thought you might come." I leaned against the kitchen counter, gripping the edge with one hand. "Why?" I asked. "Because he's your brother. And family's important." Family. I looked around my tiny apartment, at the sticky notes with layout plans, the basil plant finally sprouting, the flyers for our events stacked on the table. I thought of Maya dancing while chopping onions and Javier sketching constellations on the wall. "I'm really busy," I said carefully. "Our pop-up's opening soon. I have a lot to handle." A pause. "Well," she said, "don't let bitterness keep you from showing support." The words landed like stones, but I didn't argue. I just said, "I'll think about it." After we hung up, I stood there a long time, feeling something heavy in my chest. Grief, not over the betrayal, but over the idea that they still didn't see me. Not really. That night, Javier brought over paint samples for the last panel of the warehouse mural. We ordered pho and sat on the floor while Maya tested lighting setups. Out of nowhere, I said, "My mom called." Javier looked up. "Yeah?" She wants me to come to Ethan's Airbnb launch." He didn't say anything. Maya looked over from the corner. "You gonna go?" I shrugged. "I don't know." Silence stretched. Then Javier said, "Go if you need closure, but don't go looking for something they can't give you." Maya nodded. "You already have a family." My eyes stung. I didn't say anything for a while, just leaned back, stared at the ceiling. After a moment, Javier reached into his sketchbook and tore out a page. He handed it to me. It was a rough rendering of our warehouse, fully built, lights glowing, people inside, music swirling in invisible waves. At the top, he'd written, "Made with love by the family you choose." I tucked it into my jacket pocket. The next day, I stood in the warehouse as final decorations went up. Volunteers hung banners. Vendors tested their setups. Maya wheeled in a mini freezer full of ice cream she'd made herself. Mango lime with chili dust. I stood at the center of it all, heart pounding, nerves sparking. I wasn't sure if the permits would clear in time. I wasn't sure if my parents would show up. I wasn't even sure if Ethan had heard what we were building, but I was sure of one thing. This was mine. Not in the ownership sense, not in the way Ethan held deeds and title papers, but in the way that mattered most. This was mine because I'd bled into it, loved into it, believed into it. And tomorrow, when we opened those warehouse doors to the world, I'd be standing there, not just as an interior designer, but as someone who built a home from heartbreak. And as the final banner rose and the sun dipped low over Atlanta, I whispered, "Let them come. I'm ready." The warehouse didn't feel like a warehouse anymore. It felt alive. The moment I pushed open the front doors that morning, sunlight pouring in through the tall glass panes, I could already feel the heartbeat we'd been building for weeks. People were everywhere. Vendors setting up hand-lettered signs, Maya's crew icing down crates of sodas and rolling out hand-stitched awnings. Javier adding the last brushstroke to a mural of two hands reaching for each other across color and light. It wrapped around the eastern column like a blessing. I stood still for a moment just inside the entrance, breathing it in, the scent of fresh paint, citrusy cleaning spray, baking bread, incense from a corner stand. Notes of jazz floated through the open space, the sound checking from a local trio we'd booked last minute. It was a symphony of effort, love, and impossible determination. Tessa approached, tablet in hand, wearing a vintage jumpsuit and a lanyard that read, "Creative Chaos Coordinator." "We've got 47 vendors confirmed," she said, barely containing her grin, "and there's already a line forming outside." I stared at her. "It doesn't start for another 45 minutes. Atlanta shows up when it's curious," she said. "And baby, you made something worth being curious about." My throat tightened. I walked to the middle of the space, watching the energy move through it like a tide. People laughing, adjusting light strings, reheating food, aligning display tables to the inch. Maya caught my eye from across the room and winked. Her apron was already stained. She looked radiant. "Ready?" she mouthed. I wasn't, not completely, but I nodded anyway. At 11 a.m. sharp, we opened the doors. They came in waves, families, tourists, artists, couples holding hands. A man with a camera and a 7-year-old who ran straight to the paint-your-own postcard booth. A woman with silver braids who gasped when she saw Javier's mural and touched her chest like she'd seen herself in the brushstrokes. I floated between the stations like I was in a dream. People kept stopping me, asking who designed the flow, complimenting the layout, the vibe. Someone said, "This feels like New Orleans, but Atlanta woke up different." Javier stood beside the gallery wall, explaining the rotating exhibit to a group of college students. Maya passed out tiny cups of ginger hibiscus punch to an elderly couple dancing to the live trio. And me? I moved like I was weightless, like I was tethered to something deeper than gravity, until the power flickered. It was just after noon. The crowd had doubled. Maya's grills were humming, the musicians mid-solo. Then, the lights snapped off, the music cut, the hum of electricity vanished. Gasps. A beat of silence. My heart dropped. Tessa looked at me from across the room, eyes wide. I rushed toward the breaker closet near the back entrance, nearly slipping on a discarded napkin. Javier was already there, flashlight in hand. "It's overloaded," he muttered. "The vendor station's drawing more than we planned for." My pulse pounded in my ears. I wanted to scream, but instead, I took a breath. "We shut down the central fan lights," I said. "Keep the perimeter going. Pull some load off the kitchen stalls. Get Troy on the phone." He nodded and ran. Within minutes, we had partial power rerouted. The string lights flickered back to life. The band adjusted to acoustic. Someone began clapping in rhythm. The event kept moving, and so did I. People didn't leave. If anything, more came. By mid-afternoon, it was standing room only. I stood on one of the reclaimed wood benches to get a better view and realized, for the first time, what we'd actually built. Not just a space, but a movement. Then someone touched my arm. Lila Carter? I turned to see a tall woman in her 50s, wearing a cream linen suit and low heels that somehow stayed spotless despite the foot traffic. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled into a low bun, and she held a business card in one hand. "Yes? I'm Claire Dawson, real estate investor. I run Dawson Collective. We redevelop historic properties for creative entrepreneurs. I heard about your event through a friend of a friend. Thought I'd swing by." "Oh," I said, trying not to let my voice crack. "Thank you for coming." She smiled and looked around. "This is extraordinary. I watched her eyes trace the line of murals, the vendor stalls, the chalk art on the floor, the hanging paper mobiles swaying from ceiling hooks. "You designed all of this?" she asked. "With help," I said. "It was collaborative." She handed me her card. "I have a space in Grant Park, a Victorian, needs work, but I think it's waiting for someone like you." I blinked. "Think about it," she said, already walking toward the gallery corner. "Let's talk after the event." I stood there, card in hand, heart pounding. A Victorian, a showroom, a permanent home. The crowd swelled again, music surging. I stepped aside, pressing my back to the mural wall, just to breathe. Maya appeared beside me, cheeks flushed, her hands still dusted with flour. "What's that?" she asked. I showed her the card. Her eyes went wide. "Is this?" I nodded. She grinned so hard I thought her face might split in two. Then she threw her arms around me. "We did it," she whispered into my hair. "You did it." I didn't cry, not then, but something inside me cracked open in the best possible way. Later, as the sun dipped behind the skyline and the crowd finally began to thin, I took the mic. It was just a small platform we'd built from milk crates and wood panels, but as I stepped up, everyone turned. Maya stood at the front, hands clasped. Javier leaned against the mural, watching. "I just want to say thank you," I began. My voice trembled. "This event started as a way to heal something I thought was broken beyond repair. But you helped me build something better, not just in this space, but in myself." I paused. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about finding family and creating beauty, even after loss. There was a silence that felt warm, safe, then applause. Not polite, not forced, real. I stepped down, my heart a thudding drum, and Maya slipped her hand into mine. Javier reached over and touched my shoulder, grounding me. We stayed like that for a long time, the three of us, just breathing, just being. As people cleaned up and night stretched across the city, I looked at Claire's card one more time. And in that moment, I realized this event wasn't the destination. It was the launch pad. But before I took the next leap, Ethan's opening was tomorrow. And for once, I was walking in with power. The Grant Park Victorian didn't look like much at first glance. Its paint had peeled into long, curling ribbons that fluttered in the wind like old secrets. One of the front steps was broken clean through, and the wraparound porch leaned slightly to the left, not dangerously, just enough to suggest it had been waiting too long for someone to care. Claire stood at the gate, arms folded loosely, gaze fixed on the house like she was already halfway through its rebirth. "I know," she said without turning. "She's rough." I stood beside her, shielding my eyes from the late afternoon sun. "She's got bones." Claire smiled. "That's exactly what I thought when I saw your pop-up. You didn't hide the warehouse's flaws. You used them." I glanced at the front windows, their glass streaked with decades of dust and ghosted fingerprints. I imagined sheer drapes, warm light pouring through, clients walking across the creaky floors in socks, murmuring about color palettes and statement furniture. Claire pulled a key from her coat pocket and offered it to me. "Come see." Inside, the air was stale but soft, like it had been waiting for someone to open the windows and let the stories breathe again. The floorboards groaned under our feet. A chandelier hung sideways in the foyer, wallpaper curled like old love letters no one had finished reading. But the ceilings were 12 feet high. Claire stepped into what once was the formal dining room and turned slowly, her heels echoing. "The idea is simple. You design it your way. We handle the restoration logistics, the licensing, the paperwork. You get your showroom. Permanent. A business incubator. I'll be your first investor." I swallowed. My throat had gone dry. "Why me?" I asked. She looked at me then, steady and calm. "Because you built something honest, something real. That warehouse was more than just creative. It was healing, and I think Atlanta needs more of that." I didn't answer right away. I walked into the kitchen, or what was left of it. Yellowed tile, broken cabinet doors, a single dangling wire where a light should be. And yet, I saw it. The shelves, the accent wall, the breakfast nook with clients sipping espresso, flipping through lookbooks while Maya's pop-up desserts rested on gold-rimmed trays nearby. My dream had always been about space, but now it was about people, and this This could be both. I want it, I said softly. Claire nodded. Then it's yours. I left with the key in my pocket. Back at the apartment, Maya and Javier were waiting. Maya sat cross-legged on the floor, peeling stickers off mason jars from the pop-up. Javier was flipping through a magazine, pencil stuck behind his ear. Well? Maya asked, eyebrows raised. I tossed the key on the coffee table. It landed with a soft clink. Javier leaned forward. That's a very literal mic drop. It's happening, I said. Claire offered to fund a permanent space. She believes in it. In me. Maya shrieked, launching herself at me. You better not forget us when you're famous. You are it, Javier added, standing to hug me too. You know that, right? I nodded, eyes hot. I'm starting to. We celebrated with takeout and cheap wine, passing the bottle around as we sprawled across the floor in a heap of limbs and laughter. But beneath the joy, I could feel it creeping in. That pull. That unfinished sentence. Ethan. The next morning, a formal invite sat in my inbox. His Airbnb launch party. An RSVP button that seemed to pulse like a dare. I hovered over it for too long. Then I clicked yes. Not because I wanted to be part of it, but because I was ready to finish what I started. Tessa drove me across town that afternoon. You sure you don't want backup? She asked as we passed the Inman Park sign, the neighborhood trees arching overhead like memories. I need to do this alone, I said. The street was painfully familiar. Every brick on the sidewalk, every porch swing, every dogwood tree, it all screamed this was supposed to be yours. And now, it belonged to my brother. I stepped out of the car, heels clicking against the pavement, and stared at the house that used to live in my daydreams. The porch had been repainted. The front lawn manicured within an inch of its life. White lights twinkled from the balcony like the world's most curated apology. I took a breath and walked up the steps. Inside, it was crowded. Ambient music, faux laughter, Ethan's voice drifting from room to room like a sales pitch in motion. When he saw me, he actually grinned. Lila, you came. I didn't think you would. I didn't smile. He pulled me into a quick, performative hug. Looks good, huh? We put a lot into this place. I looked around. The walls were whitewashed. The floors had been sanded and glossed into something cold. The furniture was cookie-cutter modern. Not a single element felt lived in. It wasn't a home. It was a profit plan. You turned it into the catalog, I said. Ethan chuckled. That's the idea. Clean, neutral, universal appeal. He motioned to a woman beside him. This is Marla. She manages bookings. She nodded politely, then disappeared into the crowd. He turned back to me. I actually wanted to talk to you about something. I raised an eyebrow. I'm thinking of expanding. I've got leads on a few other properties. I know you've got an eye. I'd love to have you design some of the interiors. I stared at him. Was he serious? You want me to design your Airbnbs? He shrugged. You're talented. We could make a great team. I felt the laugh before it came. Sharp, bitter, not entirely unkind. I'm opening a showroom, Ethan, I said, in Grant Park, full renovation, fully funded. Claire Dawson is backing it. His smile faltered. I'm not designing for someone else's passive income, I added. I'm building something that actually matters. He blinked. I didn't mean. I know exactly what you meant, I said. And that's the difference between us. You build for bookings, I build for people. I turned away before he could answer, weaving through the guests, back out onto the porch. The air felt lighter out there. I didn't realize my hands were shaking until I gripped the railing. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It didn't hurt at all. Back in the car, I looked one last time at the house I used to love. It was beautiful, yes, but it wasn't mine. It never had been. And as we drove away, I didn't feel loss. I felt release. I pulled Claire's key from my bag, held it in my palm. One door had closed. Another was just beginning to open, and tomorrow I'd unlock it. I didn't plan what I was going to wear. That morning I just stood in front of my closet and reached for the linen blazer I'd worn to the pop-up, the one still faintly stained with paint, with a stitch loose under the right sleeve. I paired it with dark jeans and a clean white tee. No jewelry, no extra layers, just me. Authentic. Bare. Enough. The drive to Inman Park felt shorter this time. I watched the trees blur past my window, their branches twisting in the wind like they were trying to pull each other back. I wasn't nervous, Not exactly, but my heart kept reminding me this wasn't just a visit. It was a return to the site of the wound, the place where the house I'd dreamed of, the one I used to sketch over coffee and cry over in silence, now lived in someone else's version of success. When I pulled up, the house looked the same as it had a few days ago. Polished, performative, a stage dressed up as a home. There were already guests milling around the porch. I stepped out of my car, boots hitting the pavement with purpose, and walked through the front gate like I owned the place. Because in some ways, I did. Not the deed, not the land, but the story, the history, the pain it cost to build something better. Ethan greeted me in the foyer, same smug charm as always, his shirt crisp, smile too perfect. "You came," he said, like I was late to a family dinner and not a guest at the opening of the house he'd stolen. "I said I would," I replied. He opened his arms like he expected another hug. I didn't move. He dropped them casually and nodded, leading me into the living room. The house was full, strangers sipping wine from stemless glasses, murmuring about square footage and elevated minimalism. A man complimented the marble countertops. A woman snapped photos near the fireplace where my original vision had once included custom tile mosaics and a built-in reading nook. Everything was slick. Everything was sterile. It was exactly what Ethan thought success should look like: shiny, fast, marketable, and utterly empty. "I have to admit," he said, handing me a drink, "this came together pretty well." I nodded slowly. "It's clean." "You've got a good eye, sis. I meant it, you know. That offer, to work together. We'd make a great team." I stared at him for a moment, trying to read the lines on his face, but there was nothing there. No apology, no regret, just the same ambition that had always propelled him forward like a freight train. No brakes, no rearview mirror. "I'm not looking for a team," I said, "at least not one built on something that wasn't offered honestly." His expression faltered for just a second. "It's just business, Lila." "No," I said, voice even. "What you did wasn't business. It was personal. You knew what that house meant to me. You knew I'd been saving for it, planning for it, and you took it anyway." His jaw shifted slightly. "You were never going to move fast enough. I saw an opportunity, and you used our parents to fund it," I cut in, "while I was working overtime to qualify on my own." He didn't respond. I looked around the room again at the polished furniture, the framed prints of generic art, the strategically placed baskets and throw blankets. "This place doesn't have your fingerprints," I said quietly. "It has a formula," he blinked. "It's designed to book. And that's all it'll ever do." I set the untouched wine glass on a side table and walked toward the door. "Wait," he said behind me. "You're just going to leave?" I turned to him, calm, clear. He stared at me like he didn't understand. And maybe he didn't. But I didn't wait for him to figure it out. On my way out, I found my parents standing near the front porch. Mom wore pearls she only brought out for special occasions. Dad held a glass of something amber and expensive looking, his eyes scanning the crowd like he wasn't sure what he was supposed to be proud of. "Lila," Mom said, startled, "we didn't think you'd come." "I said I would," I replied. They exchanged a glance. "This really is something, isn't it?" she asked, motioning around. "Ethan's worked so hard." "Has he?" Mom hesitated. "He's been under a lot of pressure. We just wanted to support—" "I know," I interrupted, "and that's your choice, but you never once asked what it cost me." Dad cleared his throat. "We didn't mean to hurt you." "I believe that," I said. "But you did." They both fell silent. I could have said more. I could have unloaded every inch of pain, every missed call, every moment I sat alone in my apartment wondering if they even noticed the silence between us. But instead, I exhaled. "I'm building something new," I said. "Claire Dawson offered me a Victorian in Grant Park. I'm opening a permanent showroom, funded, designed by me, for my community." Mom's eyes widened. That's incredible." Dad shifted. "Why didn't you tell us?" I smiled softly. "Because I wanted to do it without needing your approval." And then, for the first time in a long time, I felt free. "I'm not angry," I added, "but I do need space to keep growing, on my terms." They didn't argue. They didn't beg. They just nodded. I left without looking back. Outside, the street was quiet. The sky had turned that soft lavender that only comes right before dusk. I slid into my car, the Grant Park key warm in my pocket. As I pulled away, I caught one last glimpse of the house in my rearview mirror, the house that once held my future. And now, it was just a building. My heart didn't ache anymore. It beat steady, hopeful, because ahead of me, another house waited. A house that still needed walls painted and stories told. A house that would hold my work, my community, my chosen family. A house that was mine not because of bricks or blueprints, but because I was building it with love, not spite. And tomorrow, the real work would begin. The first time I stepped into the Victorian as its rightful tenant, the air inside was still thick with dust and potential. Light streamed through the cracked, stained glass windows, splashing faded colors across the warped hardwood floor. The staircase creaked like it was greeting me personally. And the walls, those tall, time-worn walls, waited, expectant, like they knew something magical was coming. I stood in the foyer, tool belt slung around my waist, sleeves rolled up, a clipboard in one hand, and Claire's floor plans in the other. A dozen empty rooms, 1,000 ideas, and all of them mine. No backup, no blueprint for approval, no brother hovering behind the curtain, just a dream, raw and real, taking its first breath. Claire met me at 7 o'clock a.m. sharp that first morning, coffee in hand, linen suit already spotless. "I've hired a few contractors to help with the structural work," she said, handing me a checklist. "But the aesthetic decisions? All you." She smiled, warm and steady. "You're the designer. Don't forget that." I didn't. Every day that followed blurred into the next. Dust clouds, scaffolding, fabric samples, and endless supply runs. I swapped heels for steel-toed boots, lip gloss for power tools. My arms ached in places I didn't know had muscles. My fingernails lived permanently under layers of paint and plaster, but I'd never felt more in it. Maya arrived every afternoon, sleeves rolled, sleeves stained, hauling snacks and joy in equal measure. "Smells like potential and plaster," she said the first time she walked in. "Mostly plaster," I groaned, brushing drywall dust from my hair. Javier handled the back courtyard, turning overgrown hedges and cracked concrete into an artist's garden. He painted the gate with curling vines and gold-leafed stars like a portal to a secret space. Inside, we tore down walls, but only the right ones. The parlor would become a gallery space, curated vignettes of texture, light, and line. One room for bold palettes, another for soft, earth-toned minimalism. The front bay window became a conversation nook with velvet chairs and arched bookcases. We restored the original fireplaces, painted the upstairs studio in warm creams and dusty rose. I sourced antique fixtures from estate sales, spent hours sanding down every corner by hand. Some days I wanted to scream. The city inspector delayed our permit, twice. Our plumbing bid fell through last minute. One morning, the contractor drilled through a support beam by accident, and I nearly cried in the kitchen with Claire watching silently from the threshold. She didn't say much, just handed me a mug of tea and murmured, "You're allowed to feel it." Then we keep moving. I did feel it. All of it. The fear, the exhaustion, the deep ache of trying to birth something beautiful while holding on to your sanity with one hand and a caulk gun in the other. But underneath the fatigue was something else. Pride. This was mine. Piece by piece, inch by inch, I was turning a forgotten house into a living, breathing story. And not just my story. Ours. The showroom became a mirror of the community that helped shape it. One room featured artwork from local creatives, curated by Javier. The kitchen hosted rotating tastings, curated by Maya and a few of her chef friends. The library nook had bookshelves donated by Tessa's clients, filled with design history, poetry, and community memoirs. Even the doorknobs had history, salvaged from homes being demolished across the city. I made sure each detail whispered something personal. One morning, I arrived early, before sunrise. The sky was still a soft navy outside, and the street lamps painted golden streaks across the porch steps. I unlocked the door slowly, stepped inside, and just stood there. The chandelier over the stairwell was wired now. The walls had been painted. The furniture was all in place, covered, but there. It smelled like wood polish, eucalyptus, and faint traces of lavender from the candle Maya insisted on lighting each evening. I walked through every room, running my hand over the armrests, the windowsills, the polished countertop we'd fought 3 weeks to get delivered on time. Upstairs, in the corner of the top floor, sat my office, small, quiet, filled with light. My desk faced the street. Beside it, my old sketchbook rested open, the same one I'd used when the dream was nothing more than ink on paper. I flipped to the first page. The original drawing of the Inman Park house stared back at me, the one that never came true. I traced the edges with my fingertip, my chest tightening, not with regret, but recognition. That house was the door I wasn't meant to walk through, because this house was the home I was meant to build. Downstairs, Javier had arrived early, whistling as he arranged throw pillows. Maya entered seconds later, toting a crate of tea tins and a stack of business cards. "We're gonna need more seating," she said, glancing around. "The buzz on Instagram is insane." Javier added, "Someone from Atlanta Weekly is coming. Might do a full feature." I smiled, breath catching in my throat. It was really happening. Opening day was 2 days away, but in that moment, we stood there, the three of us, and it already felt full. Not with customers, but with purpose. Tessa dropped by that evening with a bottle of Prosecco and matching opening crew t-shirts she'd had made on impulse. We drank in the courtyard under twinkle lights Javier had strung from the trees. Laughter floated above us, light and unburdened. I looked around the table, at Maya's warm grin, Javier's tired hands, Tessa's unshakable support. This was my family, chosen, earned, built, just like the house. Later that night, I stayed back alone, just to feel the silence. I sat on the stairs and let the weight of everything land. The years of dreaming, the pain of betrayal, the endless hours of rebuilding. I thought of Ethan's words, "It's just a house." And I smiled, because he'd never understood the truth. It was never just a house, it was home, and home was something you built, not bought. As I turned off the lights one by one, the Victorian seemed to hum around me, quiet and alive. Tomorrow I'd hang the sign, and the next day, the doors would open. The morning of the grand opening, the air smelled like rain, soft and clean, the kind of scent that made the whole world feel washed and waiting. I stood outside the showroom just after sunrise, watching the city wake up around me. Cars murmured down the street. A jogger passed with earbuds in and gave a polite nod. The sky above Grant Park was streaked with pale pink and amber. The sign hadn't gone up yet. I carried it carefully from the back of my car, a custom piece Javier and I had designed together. Matte black wood, elegant serif lettering carved deep, the Carter collective design, story, soul. The name felt right, bold but rooted, a nod to who I'd been and who I was becoming. Javier arrived minutes later, toolbox in hand, coffee balanced on his knee as he parked. "No pressure," he said, handing me a cup. "You're only opening the most soulful design space in Atlanta today." "Not intimidating at all," I muttered, clutching the cup like a lifeline. Maya pulled up blasting Stevie Wonder from her truck speakers, her curls tied up with a silk scarf, her smile already ahead of the sun. We installed the sign together, the three of us, Maya holding the ladder steady, Javier adjusting the level, me tightening the final screws with shaky but certain hands. When it was up, we stepped back in silence. The Carter Collective. I felt a rush of warmth flood my chest. It was real. It was happening. And it had my name on it. Not in ownership, but in spirit. By 10 a.m., the courtyard buzzed with chatter and camera shutters. The showroom smelled like lavender polish and espresso. Maya's catering station was set up near the entrance, passing out tiny goat cheese tarts and iced hibiscus spritzers. Javier's art stretched across the gallery wall, golden tones catching light from the tall windows. Guests wandered from room to room, stopping to touch textures, ask questions, snap selfies in the library nook. A young couple stood near the front window, whispering about using one of the layouts for their first apartment. A retired teacher teared up in the poetry room, tracing her fingers over a quote we'd painted in gold foil on the back wall. "The home we carry is the one we choose." Tessa arrived with 2 reporters in tow. She waved me over and whispered, "Smile like you know exactly what you're doing." I did, because for the first time in my life, I did. Around noon, Claire walked in. She wore a soft charcoal blazer and heels that didn't dare squeak on our perfectly refinished floors. She looked around slowly, one hand on her hip, nodding as if checking off invisible boxes in her head. "Well?" I asked, breath catching. She turned to me, eyes gleaming. "It's exceptional," she said. "But more than that, it's personal. That's why people feel it." I didn't expect her to hug me, but she did. A short, warm embrace. "You made the dream real," she said. "And now we expand." I blinked. "Wait, expand?" She smiled. "Let's talk Monday." Before I could respond, Maya grabbed my arm and dragged me to the kitchen to taste test the vegan lemon bars that were apparently spiritual. She fed me a bite like a proud sister and promptly burst into tears. "I can't believe this is yours," she said, wiping her eyes with her apron. "It's ours," I whispered, because it was. Javier joined us with a bottle of chilled Prosecco and a stack of hand-painted thank you cards. One for every vendor, every artist, every volunteer. Each one signed by all three of us. Outside, the music picked up. A band from the local art school had set up in the garden. Laughter drifted through the air like wind chimes. Someone's dog barked playfully near the patio benches, and standing in the center of it all, I saw my chosen family. Not just Maya and Javier and Tessa, but everyone who'd come through. People who believed in something handmade, something honest. I glanced at my phone. A text from Mom. "Heard about the opening. Your cousin sent a photo. Looks amazing. We're proud of you. Just that. Nothing more." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't need to anymore. Ethan's name didn't come up, not once. Not in the press mentions, not in conversations, not in my thoughts. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned and golden light poured through the showroom windows, I stood in the parlor alone. The house was quieter now, still glowing, and I let myself feel it fully. The satisfaction, the release, the pride. It had taken heartbreak to get here. It had taken being broken. But in that fracture, I'd found new roots. Javier stepped beside me. "You look like you're holding something." I glanced down. In my hand was the first sketch, the one I'd torn from my old notebook and tucked into my pocket this morning, the Inman Park house. "Just this," I said, offering it to him. He took it, studied it, then folded it carefully and placed it in the fireplace behind us. "You don't need that anymore." I watched the papers curl in the ashtray, a quiet goodbye. Then Maya called from the garden. "Family photo, y'all! Come on!" We all gathered under the showroom's sign, arms looped, faces flushed, hearts wide open. Click. A moment frozen. Later, after everyone had gone and the night settled in, I stood outside alone. The sign glowed gently above the door. The Carter Collective. My name, but not just mine. A name reclaimed, a name reborn. And in that stillness, I realized something. Home wasn't the house I'd lost. It was the life I'd made in its absence, and the only thing left now was to keep building. The warehouse looked different now, not just repainted or restructured, but reborn. Its cracked bricks were now traced with murals, each one telling a story of rebirth, community, and color. The vines Javier planted curled up the side like veins carrying life back into its body. The broken windows had been replaced with repurposed glass panels, etched by local artists. Sunlight pooled through them like stained memories. It wasn't just a place where our journey began. It had become part of the journey itself. I stood in the middle of the space, one hand on my hip, the other clutching my sketchbook, now full to its edges. The voices of children echoed from the back gallery, where a community art program was hosting its first Saturday session. Maya's food truck was parked just outside the east entrance, its windows open, speakers humming soft soul music, while she prepped small plates with a teenage apprentice at her side. This place used to be shadows and silence. Now it pulsed with laughter and purpose. I looked down at the newsletter printout in my hand, our new quarterly zine. On the cover, a photo of me, Maya, and Javier taken in front of the showroom last month, arms around each other, a banner behind us that read, "Celebrate what you built." That phrase had stuck. I tucked the paper into my bag and made my way out the back door. The Atlanta sun greeted me, warm and steady. My car was parked under a flowering tree near the sidewalk. As I walked toward it, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "We're thinking of visiting next weekend, just to see the showroom, if that's okay." I paused. The breeze played with the hem of my linen shirt. A car drove past, music thumping. I stared at the screen for a moment before typing a short reply. "That's okay. Let me know when." No exclamation marks, no emojis, just space. I didn't feel that familiar twist in my chest anymore when I thought of them. The pain had reshaped itself into something quieter, more distant, like a photograph you no longer needed to frame. I'd stopped expecting an apology a long time ago, and once I stopped needing it, I found peace. That evening, I walked through the showroom just as the sun was setting. The light poured in golden across the floors. Dust danced in the air like glitter suspended in a slow-motion dream. I passed by the reading nook, the design lab, the cafe corner. Each space held echoes now. Voices, ideas, memories stitched into the wood and fabric and walls. Upstairs in my office, I sat at my desk and opened a fresh sketchbook. The first page always scared me, but this time I didn't hesitate. I drew a house, not just any house, a new one, no specific architecture, just an impression. Large windows, a circular communal table in the center, skylights, vines crawling the sides. A space for people, for art, for possibility, something for the future. The knock came just after dark. I opened the door and found Javier and Maya on the porch, holding takeout and a bottle of sparkling cider. "Don't think you're getting out of celebrating just because you're acting all mysterious upstairs," Maya said, nudging past me into the foyer. "We've got Thai," Javier added, "and we're not leaving until you toast to yourself." We sat cross-legged in the studio with food containers between us, laughter bouncing off the walls. At some point, Tessa joined us too, still in her office blazer, shoes kicked off at the door. We clinked our plastic cups together. "To the Carter Collective," Maya said. "To chosen family," Javier added. "To not dying from paint fumes," Tessa joked. They turned to me. I lifted my cup. "To what comes next?" We ate under dim Edison bulbs until the food was gone and the stars began to show through the skylights. At one point, I leaned back and just listened. Maya teasing Javier, Tessa reciting something hilarious from her client meeting. Their voices were familiar now, safe. And I realized, this was it. This was home. Not a single place, not a single moment, but the rhythm of being loved without condition. Later, after they'd all gone, I stepped outside and stood beneath the sign, the Carter Collective. It no longer felt like a dare, it felt like a promise I'd kept to myself. I pulled out my phone and opened a new note. Future projects, monthly design workshop for local students, rooftop event series, dinner plus design partner with Javier's mural nonprofit, write a book. The last one surprised me, but it didn't scare me. I looked up at the night sky, the city breathing around me, and felt a quiet certainty settle into my bones. Ethan never understood. He built houses for visitors. I built homes for belonging, and what I built couldn't be listed on booking platforms or measured in square footage. It lived in laughter, in light, in people who stayed. And the truth is, his betrayal didn't destroy me. It rerouted me. And what I found on that new path wasn't just success, it was freedom. If you've made it this far, thank you. Maybe you've been where I was, bruised by family, uncertain of your worth, standing at the edge of something that once felt like failure. If so, I hope you remember this. Family isn't just the people who share your name. It's the ones who see your light and choose to walk beside it. And sometimes, the home you thought you lost is just the road that leads to one you were meant to build. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories of transformation. Share your own story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you found your chosen family. And don't miss our next video, where another dreamer turns pain into purpose. Thanks for joining me. Now go build something beautiful.